Okay, so we're continuing on for Lab 4. Right now we're on step 28, which is creating the pivot support. So in my new file here, I'm going to create a sketch on the front plane. Okay. And I'm just going to roughly draw the geometry here. A little exaggerated, of course, but this will help me dimension it later. Oops. Okay. Now I'm going to dimension everything here. So I have my origin here. I'm going to set that for 80 millimeters. I'm also going to make sure that my origin is down to this line here by setting this as 0. Alright. I'm going to set the difference between these two heights. Just set that to 0 so they're equal. I'm going to go ahead and set the origin to this side as 80 millimeters. Okay. This width here will be $5 This one here, 5 millimeters as well. And I'll select this width here as 5 millimeters. Okay, starting to shape up here. Now I just need to select the height on these sides here for 150 millimeters. And that looks pretty good to me. I'll just double check. We have 80 and 80 here. Actually, that's my mistake. This should be 80 millimeters to the outside. So I'll just quickly delete these. Okay, and that's the outside to the center here, to the origin. That should be 80. And then our overall width will be 160 rather than the mistake that I made earlier. Okay, so now we have the first profile for our pivot support. Just double check to make sure. Yep, looks exactly like the lab manual. Okay, so I'll move on here by creating an extrusion. We'll do a mid-plane and 100 millimeters for our depth. Okay. Now we'll move on to the next step where we're going to draw a circle on the bottom face here by selecting sketch and creating a circle with 50 millimeter diameter. So diameter there, this should be 50. In the lab manual, it's kind of difficult to see this dimension, but if you just read through the paragraph, you'll notice it says create a 50 millimeter diameter with a height of 1100 millimeters. So of course that means that this diameter here has to be 50. Then I'll exit it, select that sketch, select feature and extrude, and do a blind depth of 1100 millimeters. Okay, I'm going to zoom out. It looks correct. Now back to this side face here. I'm going to create a sketch. Actually, you know what? My mistake. We'll create this sketch on the right plane, which is down the center. The end result would be the same, but it's always good to follow the lab manual in case there's any confusion later on. Okay, so I'll create a circle right along the center here of the origin. And I will dimension this to 30 millimeters diameter. Then select that center point to the end line there and set that as 125 millimeters. Okay, then exit that sketch. Now I'll just do an extruded cut by selecting the sketch feature, extruded cut, and mid plane. And actually, you know what? We'll just do through all both. And now it's going to cut in both directions. And there we go. Now that's the end for this part, so I'll just go ahead, click File, Save As, and call this the pivot support. Okay. Now we'll move on. I believe there's one more part. Yeah, we're going to create this output pipe. So File, new part, and we're going to create 2 sketches in this new part. The first sketch being on the top plane. Okay, this is just simple 2 circles. So we'll dimension the interior circle as 30 millimeters diameter and the exterior circle 40 millimeters in diameter. Okay, and exit this sketch. We're going to rotate a little bit, and on the front plane, which you can see here is perpendicular to that first plane, I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch. This is our sketch 2, and this one was giving the students some confusion, so I'm going to show you guys the best way I know how to create this sketch. We'll draw a line from the origin upwards and leave it undimensionalized. Then we're going to go ahead and do a 3-point arc right at the edge of our first line. We'll just place the second point here, and now you're going to move this arc. Oops, that didn't work as I expected. Okay, let's try this again. Select the endpoint like that, and we'll drop it there. Now I'm going to dimension this arc, so this one should be 40 millimeters diameter. Okay, now I'm just going to select this endpoint and the center point of this arc, and I'm going to set that as 40 millimeters, and same thing here, 40 millimeters. Okay, so this creates a perfect 90-degree arc with 40 millimeter radius. I'll select this line, say that is 10, and then I'll quickly draw the last line here and put a smart dimension on that for 10. Okay, there we go. So if I exit the sketch, you can see here we have this profile, which is essentially a straight line exiting the profile of our pipe, then it curves for a 40 millimeter radius, and then a straight line for 10 millimeters again. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go back to features and go swept boss, and I'm going to select that. It's going to ask me to pick the profile. I'm going to pick this sketch 1 here using the tree. Then I'm going to select the path, which will be sketch 2, and it gives me a preview here, and you'll see I have something like this. So once again, if you're only joining me for this video, remember that I changed in the first video the display from tangent edges removed, which is something we set in Lab 1. I changed that to tangent edges visible. Here is especially crucial for you to be able to see those edges, because now we can see here the end of our curve and the beginning of our straight section of pipe. If I was to have that as tangent edges removed, it would just look like one solid sweep of pipe, which isn't exactly true, because as you can see here, when I switch to have those tangent edges, you can see that it is flat. Like this is a non-curved piece of pipe for the first 10 millimeters and last 10 millimeters of this elbow. Once we're done that, we'll move on here to step 33. So I'll create a new sketch on this right face here. Now don't confuse that it says right side of face in the lab manual. They do not mean the right plane, which would of course be somewhere in the middle of this elbow. They mean this edge here, this opening of the elbow. Select that face right here, you can see it again, this face right here highlighted. Select that face and create a new sketch, and then what we're going to do is we're going to select convert entities, and we're going to select that inner circle. And if you remember, that basically takes that inner circle there, the edge, and creates a circles in the sketch based on that geometry. Now I'm going to go ahead and select offset entities, select that circle again. We'll reverse that and we'll select the offset distance as 5 millimeters. So this is going to offset our interior diameter by 10 from our exterior diameter, right? Because 5 times 2. And this again is something that I showed in the first video, I believe, for Lab 4, which was how to do the offset entities from a circle. Go ahead and press OK, and then exit the sketch. Now we have our 2 circles created inside. So you can see here, if I select sketch 3, it highlights these 2 circles, which are on the end of that elbow, one of course matching the inside diameter of the tube, and the second one being a new diameter. Now what I'm going to do is go back to features and select sketch 3 and click extruded boss. Now we haven't changed this parameter before, so just pay special attention to what I'm about to select, which is the from dialog box here, the start condition. It says sketch plane. We're going to click offset. Now what that offset's going to do is it's going to start the beginning of our extrusion from an offset distance of the sketch plane, which in this case is this right face of the elbow. So we want to set that offset to 10 millimeters in depth, and you can see immediately it sets the offset on the outside direction of our elbow. So I'm just going to flip that right there. Okay, we click next to offset, we click the reverse direction button, and that will set the beginning of our extrusion to be 10 millimeters inside of the elbow, which corresponds to the straight section of pipe at the end of the elbow. Then we'll set our second end condition here to blind, and it'll be a depth of 410 millimeters, which is 400 millimeters of outside pipe extrusion plus the 10 millimeters inside right here, right? Then we're going to go ahead and press OK. So now what we have here is an outlet pipe with this little downturned elbow. Double check that it looks exactly like this, and then go ahead and save this as the output pipe. Okay, at this point you want to double check that all your parts match up with mine, or they match up with the lab manual, because the next video we're going to go into how to assemble this pump. The assembly of this pump is a little bit difficult for a number of reasons, which I'll explain in the next video, but to save yourself some trouble, just go ahead and double check to make sure all your radiuses are correct. The radius of your bolts, make sure you have your 24 millimeter nut rather, and your 30 millimeter nut plus the 30 millimeter bolt. Make sure everything is perfect up until this point to avoid confusion in the next video that I will create.